What a lovely way to start, Dr. Holly. Thank you everyone for being here today. Really excited to see all of these awesome faculty, community partners, and folks that are interested in this work. And we have a great session planned. Hats off to the Service Learning Academy team that continues to pull this this piece together. I'm starting us off today, and this Redlining Share Out Session. Excited to see you all. Thanks for joining us over your lunch hour. When we're starting our sessions, and we're really thoughtful in the Service Learning Academy about prioritizing our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And the redlining work that we've been doing as a priority over the past several years is a part of that. We know that service learning is a way to kind of plant seeds and make sure that we give students opportunities that will grow for the future in their learning as well as in our community, so that they have the opportunity to really impact how we do things, what our community looks like, etc. And also, more importantly than ever, build and develop the leaders and the mavericks that we know that we need to lead in the future, as well as engage students in the community, especially online. So this is really important right now. I also want to start today by including a statement about honoring our native lands as a part of our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. We have a statement that we've prepared in consultation with Native American Studies Department and Campus Compact that acknowledges this. So just as a reminder why we do this, we deliver a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the historical legacy of colonialism by honoring and paying respect to the land which was taken by conquest, along with the domination of the people who inhabited the land and the imposition of white supremacy. We do it to raise greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights as a small step toward equitable relationship and reconciliation. So as such, we do recognize that we are guests living on these lands that were represented by Native nations whose sovereignty, governance, and treaty lands existed long before the state of Nebraska. Specifically, these nations include the Omaha, Ponca, Santee, Ho-Chunk or Winnebago, Lakota, Pawnee, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Mescawi, Oto Missouri, Iowa, Kaw, Wichita, Kickapoo, and Delaware nations. So for those that I don't know, I'm Julie Dierberger. I'm the director of the Service Learning Academy. Very excited to have you here, and I'll turn it over to the team. Kirsten.
I'm Kirsten Case-Fuller, and I'm the community liaison with the Service Learning Academy. I'm so glad that you're all here today, and I just wanted to share what makes me really excited about this particular priority that we have, and that is how we can help support our community partners and the important work that they're doing around the current day impacts of redlining on our community. So thanks for being here. I'm going to pass it on to Latrina.
Good afternoon, I'm Latrina Hall, and I'm the P16 Initiative Coordinator in the Service Learning Academy. Thanks for being here. Just to touch on why I'm interested in this work, I think it's a great way to help students explore redlining and its implications, which there are so many in our community, and for students to be able to put a name to what they may already be experiencing or seeing, but not able to have language to describe it or understand it at a deeper level. I'll turn it over to Allegra.
Hi everyone, I'm Allegra Harden, the Campus Compact AmeriCorps Vista here at the Service Learning Academy. In my role, I focus on building capacity for anti-poverty service learning, which also includes the priority area of redlining. And with that, I'll pass that on to Madeline.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Madeline Hagar. I'm the Whites Fellow in the Service Learning Academy. And what kind of brings me to this work is kind of what some of my colleagues have already said, wanting to provide opportunities to community partners and to students to better understand kind of redlining, what it is, and the impacts that it has today, and one of the things I think is interesting about redlining too is that you can really see its impacts in all sorts of different ways. And so there's so many different ways for students and partners to be involved in this work, even if it's not necessarily quickly identifiable as redlining, given its just really nuanced impacts. And I also just want to take a moment to recognize Sanaa and Annie, who are two of our graduate assistants in the Service Learning Academy. Both of them are helping us out today kind of by facilitating this session, and they're wonderful members of our team as well. With that, I will pass it to Kirsten to kind of talk a little bit about the session today.
Thank you. So we want to use this time as best as we can with you. We know that this is a topic that we could really spend days and months really digging into. And so today we really want to focus on understanding redlining and its impact on Omaha at a very high level, but more importantly, how service learning can be used as a tool to help address this by engaging both faculty and students in that work. And that is just such a powerful opportunity that we have at UNO for all of our campus stakeholders to be engaged in this. And so we're going to hear from some of our partners that have been engaged in this work previously, so we can learn about their experience, but also we will have plenty of time for questions and answers because we really want to look at how we can further deepen this work that we have already started here at UNO in partnership with you. And so Madeline's going to talk a little bit about what redlining is to get us started.
Thank you, Kirsten. Kind of as Kirsten was just saying too, this is really kind of a high level overview, and I just kind of wanted to be able to give all of us some shared language and a bit of a common understanding for where we're coming from into this work, but this is by no means completely encompassing of what redlining is or its impacts on Omaha or more broadly in the United States. So first, redlining is the practice of systematic disinvestment of resources and services from residents of certain communities based on race. I think the Union of Contemporary Art in Omaha also has a fantastic way of describing redlining and showing how it's operationalized. And they describe it as a process of transforming explicit racism, so the way individuals may be talking to each other or interacting outwardly, into structural racism. And these structural conditions largely remain today. And so what do I mean by structural racism? So this means that kind of regardless of how people are interacting with one another, the system is set up such that there are going to be certain people who are kind of benefited by the system and advantaged, and others who are going to be kind of left out and disadvantaged. And so in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, racism really becomes kind of embedded into the US housing system, which is where this term redlining kind of comes from. And so redlining is the term that comes from the maps that were created by the Homeowner Loan Corporation in the 1930s. And so you can see the map of Omaha right here. And essentially what's going on is businessmen and lenders were kind of talking about the levels of risk in different areas. And they came up with this kind of 4-part designation. And so green means that's a fantastic neighborhood. We should be loaning money to residents there to purchase their homes or for mortgages. Blue is like okay, yellow designated an area that's pretty risky for lenders, and red was the worst. And so that's kind of where redlining comes from. And if you were an individual who lived in a redlined area, that means that no one was going to be willing to loan you any money for a mortgage or anything like that, and you're really restricted via kind of financial services. And so in Omaha, what we see is this is kind of happening in the area that we would call North Omaha today, and also a little bit further south, if you look towards the bottom of that map, that's where the old stockyards used to be. And so if you follow the work by Professor Greenberg at Creighton, the professor has also kind of created additional maps that use this original map on display here, but trace kind of continuing trends of racial segregation and white flight in these areas that were originally designated as redlined ones in the 1930s. And so kind of why does this matter? And so it matters because home ownership is a way that we build generational wealth in the United States. And so if you're in an area that's redlined, you're unable in the 30s, 40s, and 50s to obtain that loan to be able to hopefully like buy a home. And so if you're cut off from that, you're cut off from an ability to really build wealth over time. And this is something that education or current levels of income can really struggle to overcome, because people have already kind of over decades, over years, over generations, kind of been given this head start by having a home for so long. Additionally, people who are living in these redlined areas, those areas become known as risky, undesirable. And so what we see is both financial institutions like banks are both unwilling to lend to you, but then other services start to leave as well and move out. And so you're further disadvantaged that way. And additionally, things that do move into those areas are things like plants or factories. And as we know, factories can produce lots of air pollution, which can then have really negative physical impacts on people as well. And so it really becomes this vicious cycle through this structural system where it's not kind of just this one element that's impacting people anymore. It's something that is happening continuously and over decades and years. And so that's kind of why for us, it's really important to still be working on this and prioritizing this, because those effects are still felt today and they can be seen through a variety of different lenses, both through maybe that lack of homeownership and lack of wealth and the wealth gap, but also things like kind of like environmental racism with harms from other factories or businesses that have kind of been isolated and pushed into those areas. And so with that, I want to turn it now to Latrina to talk a little bit about the social determinants of health framework, which will kind of help us build out our understanding of this work.
Thank you for that definition and context, especially local Omaha context, Madeline. So as the SLA embarked over the past, or about 2 years ago, on exploring redlining and how it could be further investigated and addressed through service learning, we thought about how we could start these conversations with partners in a way that was meaningful and relevant to their work, but also yielded opportunities to collaborate across disciplines to do this work via service learning. And the social determinants of health framework, which is defined by the World Health Organization as conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age, was a really effective way for us to take this lens and look at redlining and see natural ways to apply it to various academic disciplines and various ways in which socially, economically, and environmentally people's lives are impacted. Redlining is one of those factors that can have many different implications on folks' lives, especially in these different areas along the wheel. So thinking about these implications of redlining to all of the factors on this wheel, this framework seemed to be an effective way for us to contextualize the discussion and demonstrate natural alignment to academic disciplines. And so we wanted to use this framework for our discussion today, but we've also shared this with our partners, and this is one of the ways that they'll be addressing through their pre-recorded videos how they approached redlining in their service learning projects.
So bringing it back to how we talk about this in the framework of service learning, and how do we incorporate the redlining and the social determinants of health within that. We want to begin by talking about the definition of service learning. So service learning is an interactive method of teaching that combines classroom instruction with meaningful community identified service. Service learning allows students to learn not only from their primary course instructor, but also from community partners. And so service learning offers engaging pedagogy that demonstrates to students that learning can go beyond the classroom setting into their local communities. So now that we've defined service learning, we can discuss the different types of service learning that UNO has to offer. So the Service Learning Academy offers 3 different types of service learning projects: traditional, Maverick Philanthropy, and P16. Traditional projects feature a UNO class that is partnered with a community organization as a co-teacher, and the Maverick Philanthropy Initiative similarly partners with a UNO class and a community organization, but is designed to encourage an interest in philanthropy while educating students on real-life impacts of giving. Finally, the P16 initiative features a UNO class that is partnered with a preschool through 12th grade class and a community organization. Each of the 3 different types of service learning can be utilized to address redlining in Omaha. Redlining is a priority area for the Service Learning Academy, and projects focused on redlining emphasize building collaborative, multidisciplinary projects and resources to address historical disinvestment in Omaha communities. Service learning projects can address redlining through using an anti-poverty framework, which emphasizes an asset-based approach to community engagement. Service learning projects that address redlining can be incorporated in your courses no matter your academic discipline. To give you some ideas of how you can incorporate projects focused on redlining in your class, we will next be introducing our panelist of speakers.
All right, so I mentioned earlier that we will hear from our speakers in pre-recorded videos. So we're going to transition to those videos now. The panelists responded to a few questions related to how they incorporated redlining into their disciplines, how they centered,
and I think that the students,
and how this work really engaged their students. And then following the videos, we'll hear directly from our panelists in a live discussion where we encourage you to participate. So enjoy.
So I'm Stu Bernstein, and I'm a professor in the College of Engineering, and I work both on the UNL and the UNO campuses. And I'm teaching a group of leadership classes which are part of what the college is calling the Complete Engineer Initiative. So what we're trying to do is take our engineers out of their comfort zone and get them to understand the importance of things like interpersonal skills, leadership, teamwork, ethics, all of those. I try to design all my courses around service learning projects. And, now that with the COVID and everything and all the restrictions, it's getting more and more difficult to work with the community agencies without making physical contact. But we're learning new methods. I mean, I'm learning all kinds of new things about Zoom and how to get the students to do videos. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. The particular course that we're using is the what's called the Engineering 200 Professionalism and Global Perspective. And this is a course that's basically, we're trying to get these students to practice professional behavior in engineering and do this through social science research. What they've done in this particular class was research redlining, what the effects were, why it was done, how it was done, and the history of it, and how it actually still continues. And we've done that because we want them to understand diversity. We want them to understand the importance of human experience. okay? And that, if they're going to be part of a team, they've got to learn to deal with diversity in all respects. Redline is one of those examples of how laws and bigotry have actually exacerbated segregation and poverty, substandard housing, and educational opportunities in the community. In fact, during this past class, one of the students actually was working for an Omaha engineering company who was responsible for redesigning some of the infrastructure in the city. And he pointed out that the infrastructure in North Omaha was completely ignored in this project. And that all the areas around North Omaha were getting their infrastructure, their sewage, their water, their streets, all these things were being improved while North Omaha was being ignored. So our students, when they become engineers, they take an oath that they're going to, and it's called the ethical oath. And I'm going to quote from it. It says they're going to uphold standards without reservation for the public good. And so what the students saw was totally unacceptable. And so for the city of Omaha to do that, for the engineering company to agree to do that, and for the engineers who work for that company to go along with it, I mean, that goes entirely against the oath that they've taken. So this is an issue. This is an issue we're trying to teach our students that, if they see this, they should know better. Racism has gone on way too long. But, I grew up in the 50s, and we were talking about racism and ending racism then, and we're having the same conversations now. What is this, 70 years later? And we're still sitting on the same dime. It seems like we've gotten nowhere. I know there's some improvements. In some cases, I think we've actually slid backwards. It's just not right. There's no reason why we should have such a diverse nation, such a diverse community, full of people that are so talented, so ready to give of themselves. And to just cut it off and say, no, I'm sorry, we don't want to deal with you because of your religion or your ethnicity or your country of origin or whatever it happens to be. It's so wrong. And I don't know why people don't understand that. And it bothers me that we're still having this same conversation. What I would say to my colleagues is, you know better. You're a professor, you're educated, you should know better. Let's teach our students. Let's hope that this new generation can finally solve this problem, that we can point them in the right direction to solving this problem. And if, we don't have to beat it over their heads, we just have to open their eyes and let them be aware of the facts and the situations and what it feels like. Show them, have them learn about empathy. Have them understand what it feels like to live in one of these communities which is segregated. Have them understand what it feels like to be a student of color. Okay, and maybe things will finally change. I do want to say there's no organization I love working with more than Service Learning Academy. All of you people there are absolutely the best. I literally look forward every semester to coming down there and brainstorming with you. The classes that I teach that have service learning projects, the students get so much more out of it. I get so much more out of it. They're so enjoyable. The agencies that I work with are so much fun. And the people that are using those agencies get so much out of it and appreciate what we're doing so much that it makes my job so worthwhile.
So I'm going to share a little bit about how SLA can help support these types of projects. And so earlier, Latrina talked about the social determinants of health framework. And regardless of what area you're teaching in, there are ways to connect with this theme and this priority area of redlining. And so we're here to help make those connections to the community, to identify the organizations and individuals that are doing this work that we can partner with and that we can support. We can work with you on identifying and working with those partners on scaffolding projects. And so how do the community needs tie to your learning objectives? And then what would a project look like that can realistically happen over the course of a semester? And then we help support that throughout the entire semester, from logistics and whatever you need to help implement it. And also, we're there to help support continued conversation about how to continue this work into the future. So oftentimes we see that partnerships continue, and we really encourage that and hope to see that. And so we're there to help facilitate that if and when needed, but really we're here to help you throughout the entire process, from ideas to implementing a project and afterwards. So we're going to transition into our next video that's going to talk about a P16 project.
Sure, I'm Craig Wiles. I teach 5th grade at Crestridge Elementary School of International Dual Language, and I have been a teacher for 24 years, and yeah.
I'm Jerry Huber. I teach the class that was involved in this project. I teach human relations for anti-bias classrooms. And I'm with the College of Education, Health and Human Sciences at UNO.
Yeah, so with my 5th graders, redlining connects in the fact that we study United States history, and we study the impacts from the very beginning of not even being a country to colonization up into being a country up to the Civil War. But it helped our students understand that America was not the way it is now. It looked a little bit different, but it gave them a true taste of what America was and how that culture prevailed.
And for my students, as I said, because the class was about basically increasing my students' diversity disposition, I thought that this was a great opportunity to do that, especially towards the metro area. But my students, there are 24 students from 21 different high schools. Many of them have not been in diverse communities where they were aware of experiences other than the ones that they had. And so this was a great opportunity for them to learn history so that they can understand that the students that they'll be serving come to where they are because of things that have happened in history and continue to happen.
Yeah. And it's also important, I wanted my students to get to know that their school was an active part in trying to get more distribution of race into the western part of Omaha, and for them to understand the active role that Crestridge played in trying to make that happen.
Exactly.
And trying to make Omaha a fairer place to live and to be a part of. So, well, inclusive communities, I thought was absolutely amazing. And out of that whole thing, I felt like we developed more community relationships that I never expected out of the whole thing. But working with the union, just having our kids dissect the bits and pieces of Omaha and just researching with each other, I think our kids learned a lot from each other.
I think so as well.
I was really amazed at your students when they're like, I learned from a 5th grader. Like, I never expected to hear that. I expected your kids to do almost all the teaching. So
Yeah,
it was fun. That it was a great balance.
It really was. And I think it was a symbiotic relationship for sure because, and I have to say, I continue to learn from your students and my students as well. And what I really liked about our project was the students learned about redlining, but truly the focus of the project was the impacts that redlining still has on multiple issues, even though it's illegal.
Yeah.
but it still goes strong. And I think for all of our students there, it kind of gave them a new lens to look through.
I guess the other part about the community piece was that they advocated for kids that are outside of 60th Street to get food past that point, and they did that through a very easy production of just voicing their story, of telling that story of, you know, my teacher picks up food and we have people who don't have food, and the transportation, which led down to even think deeper, like what was the transportation impact back then, and it just kind of drove them back. I think it made Omaha a whole picture instead of just that past picture. I think it kind of connected it well.
And I think too that just the far-reaching impacts of what redlining did, that it did impact education and housing, employment, transportation, and how those things impact our students and families and communities.
Yeah, the whole health and food desert, and I think even on the educational part, you know, we look at Crestridge sits in West Omaha supposedly, right? But we're really not West Omaha because we bring in over 73% of our population is bused in. And so the concept of, well, they're well off to do in West Omaha just points out that it's not a true picture anymore. That it's changing, but there's a lot more change that has
It's
to come
become
ahead.
more diverse.
Yes,
Definitely.
which is great.
I think too, my students, it really opened their eyes to things that they didn't, there were questions, you know, why didn't we learn about this in high school? And they really appreciated being able to do the research. We gave them the facts of redlining through the union and through Dr. Amani, who
Amazing.
Robbie had brought in, who really focused redlining on Omaha for us. So we gave them the facts, but then the students are the ones who really did that deep dive into the research as to how those facts are still relevant today.
And I think the biggest impact of the whole thing was the group that was working on education went and changed their whole entire presentation the day before because we were asking questions. And their curiosity was so deep that they went and changed it, and it was a magnificent presentation that they gave that was unbelievable. You thought they would have worked on it for months.
Oh, they did a wonderful job.
So, you know, I think going back to what we started with, you know, the whole social justice and understanding that people are not treated fairly or equally, and even in today's world, we're still not treating people fairly and equally. So I think it brings awareness to them, and hopefully they don't repeat the same things that we have been repeating, that women will have more rights, that women will be treated equally, as much as race is treated equally, and I think that's the whole part behind it. It drives the future.
I agree, and for my students, especially because they're future educators, so that the more they understand about the communities that they may end up teaching, the more effective teachers they're going to be, and the leaders that they can be within their school communities, and for their students, being advocates for their students and student families. So.
Absolutely. I think that the part that we're not mentioning though, Robbie, is how well we adapted from being in person live with each other to making this going virtual, and the kids didn't miss a beat. Like, I still had perfect attendance the whole entire time out. Like, that's surprising because they didn't have to be on.
Exactly. To think that we were going to have one large table talk event, and because of, you know, Tuesday we were in class, Thursday it was like, see you, goodbye.
We're done.
And then how do you take that big event, not wanting to waste all of the energy and efforts of the students that put in there, and working with such wonderful partners like you and Robbie and the Service Learning Academy.
Is just amazing.
Being able to just turn that around, our students did an awesome job by turning it into little mini table conversations.
Yeah, which I think was actually stronger than what we originally had planned. So it's crazy that the virtual ended up being a stronger package. And the people that were able to join us from around the community and from the UNO campus and from OPS, I think parents, it just spoke real volumes, which, you know, branched out into many other areas. I had several of my students go and do presentations for their parents with organizations they're with, and in OPS it's still going on, presenting story circles through Minnesota for Humanities to get that going, and here we are with this platform. So
Well, exactly.
it's
And my
exciting.
students this semester are in a intro to leadership development, and we use actually what we learned from the spring and are building on that and how to be leaders.
So cool.
So it was just a wonderful project.
Wow, there's so much, like I don't know how we condensed that, but just the working with you was amazing, and watching the kids work together and really seeing no gap. Like they picked up and learned so much from each other that you would never expect. Like I don't think your students expected at the beginning to learn from a fifth grader, because they're preparing to be the, so I think the lesson that they learned really fast was like, hey, I can learn from my students, which is something I've always cherished, like learning from my kids, right? So I think that opened that door, and it opened a huge door that they can see like, wow, I got to be a better listener than just always saying I have all the information.
I was in a meeting this morning, and I thought about this question because they were asking about how you can assess the learning of your students other than a test, and I thought, I wrote down service learning, and it's because we talked about the union, we went through the facts, we talked in the redlining and things like that, but they were actually able to apply what it was that they learned by going in and doing that research, and then actually seeing with their own eyes and research how things began and how they are continuing now.
Yeah.
And I think that the students learn so much just about collaboration and teamwork, social justice issues,
Open mind.
open mind, learning to listen to each other, and knowing, I guess, they came out of this knowing they have a voice.
Right, and that's the huge piece. You know, we asked them to have a piece. What are you going to do to move forward? And I think they are moving forward. I know I've had students write letters, and so they're trying to pick up on their project work, which is great. I heard from 5 of them already this morning, like, oh, you're doing redlining. I'm like, okay. So
I
that's pretty
had
positive.
somebody from the second cohort who emailed me and said, are we going to be doing that project in the spring?
That's awesome.
Like, yeah.
Yep,
Yes,
pretty
we
cool.
are.
Very cool. Yeah.
Well, Craig, it's been wonderful working with you, and I am looking forward to a project this spring.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been probably one of the best parts of my educational life. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
So we know that service learning provides opportunities for students to apply that classroom learning to real world problems, that it helps them gain skills that they need today and into the future, and that it makes learning more engaging and sticky for them. But these types of projects that are focused on redlining give students a very deep experience in really being able to provide leadership in addressing what is going on in our community today around redlining. So they get to see how they can have an impact on the community. So one of the outcomes for students is really better understanding the community. But through these types of projects, they're really getting to understand the history of our community, what's going on today and why, and how they can be active participants in helping to change that narrative in the future. So we're really lucky to have an opportunity for our last video to be from one of our students, and she'll share a little bit about her experience with us.
Hi, my name is Quincy Epley, and I'm a secondary education major here at UNO with endorsements in social sciences and deaf and hard of hearing education. The service learning class I took here was Human Relations for a Bias-Free Classroom, and the project had to do with the practice of redlining. I knew a little bit about redlining before I took the class. We talked about it briefly in a couple history classes I'd taken, but for this class we went really in depth, and it was really valuable. This class's curriculum was all about creating cultural awareness in future educators to make sure that our future students felt heard and seen and respected for their cultural values and practices. The redlining project helped us understand the underinvestment in these minority communities that still affects students in Omaha today. It also gave us an opportunity to work with elementary school students and build their understanding on the topic as well. We got to do our own research and use our individual strengths and skills to create the best project we could about our individual topics relating to redlining. This experience made me realize a lot of things about the Omaha community. There's a lot of history here that still positively and negatively affects the residents of Omaha. This class really opened my eyes to the practice of redlining and the struggles that minority communities still face in Omaha and other metro communities around the United States. And it will help me become a better teacher in the coming years because of this understanding. The connection with the nonprofit partner was very valuable to me too. I started following the work that Inclusive Communities does around the Omaha metro area, and so it's kept me informed and it's kept me involved in the community so that I can still apply what I learned in the class in the real community. I think faculty should really consider adding this to their curriculum for the class because it's a really good foundation of understanding to have that you can build on. At first glance, redlining practices seemed like they started and ended decades ago, but the impact that those practices have are still well alive today. The practice still affects education, healthcare, economics, housing, and almost every part of life for these minority redlined communities. We can build our understanding of how the world works by applying what we learn in other classes too, to this foundation of understanding of redlining.
So as we're thinking about service learning projects and opportunities to incorporate this into your future coursework, it's really important to remember that this does not mean, if you've been involved with service learning in the past, it does not mean that you have to completely rework the types of projects that you've done in the past. We can help you with those strategic partnerships and identifying who would be a great match to engage in future projects. And if you're new to this work, again, we're here to help you throughout that entire process. And so we really appreciate you being here today because now we're going to have an opportunity to transition into some Q&A, and we're really fortunate that some of the participants in the videos are here with us as well to share their expertise with you. So I'm going to turn this over to Julie.
Yes, so thank you everyone. We have Mr. Wiles here, we have Dr. Huber, and I think Dr. Bernstein, excuse me, is joining us from the car. So so if you have, does anybody have questions for any of our panelists?
We did get a question in the chat. Question was directed at Stu, but it's open to anyone who may have an answer. Recognizing that our students should know better when it comes to redlining and other issues of racism, what tools do you, engineering, other colleges, service learning, give students to act on that knowledge, especially when they might be at the beginning of their career in entry-level positions? And how has this been incorporated in service learning classes?
Wow, that actually is a great question. And I hope I don't drop out again while answering it. You know, to be honest with you, I try to teach them what I can, but most of it comes from the experiences they get through the service learning project. I think that's what teaches them. It's not what I bring to the class or what the textbook can teach them. It's more about what they learn from the people involved in the project and the agencies.
Carrie, you're on mute. Looks like you maybe had some question or some
No, I
idea.
was just going to add to that too, that our students in that particular class, that's right at the beginning of their plan of study for their curriculum, headed towards their eventual certification. And so as Quincy had said, it provides the foundation for them that their other classes will continue to build on, because our students will begin to, after that class, to begin to go out into their schools and have an opportunity to continue building those relationships with students and also working with coaching teachers and instructors that will help them take what they're learning in class and being able to apply it in a classroom of students that they'll have one day. So, you know, by the time they reach their student teaching or their clinical practice semester, they will have had over 140 hours of actual hands-on in classroom time. So it provides a great foundation for that, and being able to work with Craig's students so early on in their program before they even get the opportunity to start out again, it helps just to build that foundation to keep building on.
Jerry, I would also add that as a result of prioritizing and being really intentional about asset-based community engagement, the Service Learning Academy has added changes and priorities around this in our own training. So, and that's also for students. So we can come in and do a lot of different types of training for your students. We, over the past several years, have been doing work about addressing microaggressions in community engagement and avoiding them, as well as implicit bias trainings. I know Kirsten's done a lot of those so that students are prepared to go to think about their own biases and then reflect on that before they go into space, so that we can make sure that we are approaching partners with an asset-based lens. And additionally, knowing too and working with our faculty and our partners to identify our own biases in our own training so that we can be aware of them, so that we can also then show up as best we can for our students as well.
I think another piece that was a benefit for us, and one thing that we were looking at as we were developing this project, was for Mr. Wiles's class to be able to bring his students as much as possible either on campus or have that interaction with our students, so that higher education for them becomes something real and something that they can obtain. And also to just plant that seed about, you know, being a teacher isn't such a bad thing. Early on, when they can, you know, see young people not too far removed from where they are, who are actively learning and moving towards becoming a teacher. So I think that that was also, I know it was a goal of ours to provide that for the fifth graders.
Could I ask?
Yeah, Lynn.
Hi. This is a great session. First of all, if I don't get on again, thank you all. Thank you. I think it's very lovely. Anyway, and useful. Of course, I teach in gerontology, and I am old, and I am old enough to tell you that the history that I learned in the fifth grade, redlining was all in the art class. Nothing. There was just, it was totally whitewashed in a sense, literally. And so manifest destiny was a good thing, and, you know, da 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 da. And I took the international history courses in college, I was untouched by any of this enlightenment, except for when, you know, I never had a problem finding room for everybody in my own heart. I mean, that was good, but the formal education was deplorable on this topic. And so in order to reach people like me, or, you know, people in my age group, that I wonder if there isn't a really important mission there. I mean, we're grandparents, we're citizens, we're voters, and if we don't all get hauled off into because we're inconvenient, we're becoming another inconvenient population, subpopulation. But, you know, just saying, yeah, do you know of anything that is in the works for maybe Jerry, I mean, reaching out to older people who are willing to come maybe and relearn what we learned in kind of a misleading way.
Mm. Jerry, you're on mute.
I know, so I was saying, you could read my lips. I was like, sorry. Dr. Holly, can you repeat the question again for me?
I'm sorry, it was a real mess. just saying that when people who are now in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are still voting and everything, and they're still alive and kicking, I mean, if they are, learned a totally different version of history. Unless they went to an extraordinary, like Brown University, you know, one of the Ivies or something, they were learning like pardon the expression, the Captain America version. Manifest Destiny was a good thing. And if they haven't had any opportunity to learn better, to learn a more accurate version of history, they're going on their old, what they learned before. So it would seem to me that in addressing issues, structural issues, they might play an important role, either in keeping things the same or in wanting to change things. And so education would be like for me, everything in life. Is there any plan to target that group, to bring them into an opportunity where they could learn better, where they could learn more accurate history?
I don't know of any set plans. It sounds like a wonderful idea, though, to be able to bring that knowledge or presentation to individuals who might want to know more about it. I know as we were talking in our class so much last semester, because the whole class is built around learning identities about others' identities, but also learning about our own identity. And that was one thing when you're saying about older individuals. When I would talk to the students about my experiences, I would always preface it by saying, you know, remember, this is coming from the through the lens of at the time, 62-year-old Black woman, right? So which is going to be different than, say, what my children or my grandchildren are going to be experiencing. But it's exactly as you're saying, we each come from different perspectives, and our knowledge of it is going to be a little bit different depending on what you experienced.
Yeah, and I would just point out, Dr. Gabriel mentioned and reminded us about the senior passport program that we have, so that, you know, we do have folks that can take these courses. But I mean, to your point, Dr. Holly, I think that that's part of why we were hoping to have these kinds of sessions, is to think about where are the gaps, what are the opportunities for us to fill in, and to think about our own content areas and how we can have an impact. And so, you know, if that was something you were interested in doing, you know, then we would be happy to help reach out to a community partner. And you know, we think about, you know, we have long relationships with places like Adams Park Seniors. You know, there's lots of different organizations that we could partner with that might be interested in doing a weekly, conversation about the history of Omaha as it relates to redlining. And maybe and you know, also with the seniors, maybe they would contribute to their own memories of living in Omaha in these times. And so as we're like wrapping up the last 5 minutes too, this is a time if folks were interested in thinking about or sharing some ideas that you might already have, just like what Dr. Holly had suggested about redlining, and if there's that you're already kind of thinking about, if anybody is doing that right now.
Julie, can I add something to Dr. Holly's question?
Sure.
One of the greatest things about doing this project and it going online was my students had so many grandparents watching with them that I have done 5 different sessions with them trying to help them understand redlining and the true history of redlining. But this year I had more parents join on, getting the true history of America, because I don't teach it out of the social studies book. I teach it how it really lays out. So I think, you know, this project really helped expand out to grandparents and to our older populations, because they are taking care of most of our kids in my room. But it helped open that door. And I think it's a great idea to further that discussion, because they're really interested in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch out world. Now I'm all ready to think of something.
Matt, did you want to mention something, Dr. Gabriel?
I'm offering a class in the spring on connections between African American and Jewish music, and ties between the music industry and both collaborations and conflicts there. I taught this as a community class, which had about 80 participants through Bethel Synagogue, and so we've integrated it through a class in religious studies. And I've been trying to think through ways to connect it to the Redlining project. In North Omaha, there was a pretty significant connection between Jewish and African American musicians that I'd like to highlight. So I've just been sort of kicking around initial thoughts on that and would appreciate any ideas folks have.
Is this an academic study of music, Genia, or is it?
No, it's a social history through the lens of religious studies, examining, for example, Jewish and African American performers both utilizing blackface, and how that sort of played out within the music industry, looking at Jewish songwriters influencing Jewish artists, and the relationship between business agents and performers, and sort of how connections between religious understandings of the world played a role in those relationships.
Boy, do I have a student for you. What level is the course?
It's upper level undergraduate.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Jeanette, that sounds like a really cool project. I'm thinking about a couple of partners that you might be able to work with. One of the Great Plains Black History Museum is a great partner. Now, the Love's Jazz and Art Museum I know is undergoing some transition right now, so that would have been probably my first suggestion. But Mr. Ewing with the Great Plains Black History Museum, I could see him even utilizing this as an exhibit within the museum, which they have opportunities all the time and can be really malleable that way too. And he is a great partner. I'm really excited about continuing this work. We have time for maybe one more question or connection. No? Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody. First of all, I want to thank the SLA team. They put this together. I want to thank our presenters today, our panelists, that took the time out to share with us and answer questions. We even have somebody, I think from, is it Georgia, that joined our call here too. So thanks for being here, Del. And please know the Service Learning Academy is here to support you. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us at any point. You see our contact information is here, but we hope that you all know how to reach us at any point at unosla@unomaha.edu. We appreciate you all. We hope you stay well and healthy and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you so much.